The sound of ritualistic chanting echoes through the pristine halls of New Houston Interspecies Medical Center as Dr. Gabriel King strides purposefully toward Treatment Chamber A, his neural scanner clutched tightly in his hands. Inside, a young Gamelin girl's life hangs in the balance, abandoned by her own people's medical establishment but not by human determination. "Stop, Doctor." King's voice cuts through the solemn atmosphere as he bursts into the chamber. The assembled Gamelin priests pause their death ritual, their silver robes shimmering under the medical bay's harsh lights. 8-year-old Una lies motionless on the treatment bed, her blue-tinted skin showing the telltale crystalline patterns of neural degradation. Ambassador Krell rises from his daughter's bedside, mandibles clicking in barely contained fury. "How dare you interrupt our sacred rites, human? The medical council has made their decision. My daughter's condition is beyond help." Dr. King activates his scanner, projecting a detailed holographic image of Una's neural structure. "With respect, Ambassador, they're wrong. Look here." He highlights a cluster of neural pathways. "The crystallization hasn't reached her core consciousness center. Our quantum-assisted regeneration techniques could reverse the damage." Senior physician Varn steps forward, his ceremonial medical staff tapping against the floor. "Dr. King, you risk your license and our diplomatic relations with this display." "Our medical science has deemed this case hopeless." "Then your science needs updating," Dr. King responds, moving to Una's side. He adjusts a sensor array, and suddenly the chamber fills with the soft ping of neural activity. Una's hand twitches, responding to a basic stimulus test. Ambassador Krell freezes, compound eyes fixed on his daughter's moving fingers. The assembled priests murmur among themselves, their death chants forgotten. Hospital Director Dr. Marcus Robinson enters the increasingly crowded chamber, drawn by reports of the disturbance. "Dr. King, you understand the implications of what you're doing." "I understand that we're about to let a child die because of bureaucracy and outdated traditions, Doctor." King replies, not looking up from his readings. "Just like we almost did with childhood leukemia and HIV and 100 other hopeless conditions throughout human history." The monitoring equipment suddenly emits a sharp warning tone. Una's neural crystals are spreading faster, threatening to reach critical mass. "We need to act now, Doctor," King announces, pulling up detailed surgical protocols on his tablet. "Ambassador Krell, I can save your daughter, but you need to choose right now between your medical council's traditions and a fighting chance at life." Media drones hover outside the chamber's windows, broadcasting the confrontation to billions across both human and Gamelin space. What started as one doctor's defiance has exploded into a defining moment in interspecies relations. Dr. King stands firm, embodying humanity's refusal to accept defeat in the face of what others call impossible. The next few moments will determine not only young Una's fate, but also the future of human Gamelin medical cooperation, and perhaps the very nature of how two civilizations view the value of life itself. Ambassador Krell's compound eyes shifted between his daughter and Dr. King, mandibles working silently as he processed the weight of the decision before him. The assembled priests held their breath, their silver robes rustling in the tense silence. "Save her," Krell whispered, his ceremonial authority crumbling in the face of paternal instinct. Dr. King sprang into action, his fingers flying across the medical console. "I need treatment bay 17 prepped for emergency quantum neural intervention. Get me Dr. James Walker from Quantum Medicine, stat." Hospital Director Robinson activated his comm unit. "Security, initiate Protocol Delta 7, lock down the high-security wing." He turned to the assembled Gamelin priests. "Gentlemen, I must ask you to leave." The priests filed out, their death chants replaced by urgent medical alerts and the whir of diagnostic equipment. Through the chamber windows, media drones continued their relentless broadcast as Dr. King established a temporary research station around Yuna's bed. Dr. James Walker arrived minutes later, his quantum scanner already calibrating. These readings are unprecedented, Gabriel. The crystallization pattern is unlike anything in our database. A sharp voice cut through their discussion. Because you have no right to access Gamelin medical data. Dr. Zara, the Gamelin Medical Council's chief investigator, strode into the room. Her silver-scaled face bore the distinctive marks of high medical authority. I am here to document your violations of sacred protocol. Document away, Dr. King replied, adjusting a neural probe. But stay clear of my patient. The next hours blurred into a frenzy of activity. Dr. King's team converted Treatment Bay 17 into a specialized research lab, holographic displays showing Yuna's neural structure from every angle. The crystal formations pulsed with an ominous blue light, spreading through her neural pathways like frost across glass. The degradation is accelerating, Dr. Walker announced, pointing to a rapidly changing display. We have 7 to 2 hours maximum before the damage becomes permanent. A commotion outside drew their attention. Dr. Victor Hammond pushed past security, his Mars Colonial Institute credentials forcing them to grant him access. The controversial researcher's presence sent a ripple of tension through the medical team. Your approach won't work, Hammond declared, pulling up his own research data. But I have something that will. He revealed schematics for microscopic machines, quantum-guided nanobots designed to dissolve neural crystals. Dr. King studied the data. This was rejected for human trials, because human neural tissue can't handle the quantum interference, Hammond explained. But look at her readings. Gamelin neurons are naturally crystalline. They're practically designed for this procedure. Outside the medical center, crowds gathered. Human rights activists waved signs supporting Dr. King's intervention, while Gamelin traditionalists demanded respect for their medical practices. Admiral James Robinson's security teams created a protective corridor around the facility, their powered armor glinting under the Texas sun. In the research lab, Dr. King's team worked through the night, combining Hammond's nanobot designs with their understanding of Gamelin physiology. Ambassador Krell kept vigil by his daughter's bed, watching as the humans fought to save a life his own people had condemned. A violent seizure rocked Yuna's small frame, her crystallizing nervous system misfiring. Monitoring equipment screamed warnings as Krell stumbled back, horror evident in his alien features. We're losing the window, Dr. King announced, checking the latest neural scans. The crystals are approaching her consciousness center. We need to run the preliminary tests now or we'll lose our chance completely. Dr. Zara stepped forward, her data pad recording every moment. The medical council will not allow. The medical council isn't here, Ambassador Krell interrupted, his voice carrying the weight of diplomatic authority. But I am. Proceed, Dr. King. The research lab hummed with activity as the team prepared for their first test of the modified nanobot treatment. They had less than 48 hours to perfect a procedure never before attempted on any species and zero room for error. Dr. King initiated the preliminary scan sequence, knowing that each moment brought them closer to either a revolutionary breakthrough or a diplomatic catastrophe. The quantum interface calibrated, its subtle vibrations matching the frequency of Yuna's crystallizing neurons. The quantum interface's hum filled the lab as Dr. King analyzed the first test results. His expression darkened. The crystal dissolution rate is perfect, but look at these thermal readings. Dr. Hammond leaned over the holographic display, his face illuminated by the data streams. The quantum nanobots are generating too much heat. At these levels, we'd cook the surrounding tissue. Then we modify the quantum frequency, Dr. King suggested, adjusting parameters on his console. That would destabilize the entire matrix, Hammond countered. We need The lab doors slid open as Dr. Alina Petrov strode in, her white coat bearing the distinctive silver moon insignia of the Lunar Medical Institute. Perhaps you need to stop thinking like doctors and start thinking like engineers. She uploaded a data package to the main display. Three-dimensional models of crystalline structures rotated in the air deep space mineral formations that bore an uncanny resemblance to the patterns spreading through Yuna's neural tissue. These crystals don't just grow, they compute, Dr. Petrov explained, manipulating the display. The formations in Yuna's brain are behaving more like silicon processors than organic growths. Dr. King's neural scanner pinged an alert. In the treatment room, another crystal cluster had formed along Yuna's brain stem. Ambassador Krell's mandibles clicked with anxiety as he watched the monitoring equipment. A commotion in the corridor drew their attention. Senior Counselor Thex swept into the facility, flanked by Gamelin guards in ceremonial armor. His scaled face bore elaborate markings of governmental authority. "This unauthorized experimentation ends now," Thex announced. "Ambassador Krell, the High Council has spoken. The ritual must proceed." Hospital Director Robinson stepped between Thex and the treatment room. "I am invoking Article 7, Section 12 of the Interspecies Medical Cooperation Treaty. This facility retains medical jurisdiction while experimental procedures show documented potential for success. You hide behind legal technicalities while desecrating our traditions." Thex's voice carried the weight of centuries of Gamelin custom. Dr. Hammond's console chimed. "Gabriel, look at this." He displayed results from their latest nanobot test, this time using a crystalline shell derived from Gamelin minerals. The heat signature had dropped to acceptable levels. "We need the military guidance system to deliver these precisely," Dr. Walker said, studying the data. "1 micron off, and we risk damaging critical neural pathways." Admiral Robinson's authorization came through within minutes. Earth Defense Force troops escorted a sealed container into the lab, the prototype quantum guidance system, its sleek housing marked with military warning symbols. Dr. Zara watched the humans work, her data pad forgotten as Dr. King's team integrated the military technology with their medical equipment. Her scaled fingers traced ancient patterns in the air, healing signs passed down through generations of Gamelin physicians. "Those patterns," Dr. King said, noticing her movements. "They match the frequency signatures we're detecting from Yuna's neural crystals." Zara hesitated, then accessed her medical archives. "Our ancestors used healing crystals before we embraced modern medicine. The frequencies were said to guide the body's natural recovery. The life support equipment surrounding Yuna pulsed with warning lights. Crystal formations had reached her respiratory control centers. The child's chest rose and fell in irregular patterns as the medical systems fought to maintain her oxygen levels." Dr. King's team worked frantically, combining the quantum nanobot delivery system with harmonic frequencies derived from ancient Gamelin healing practices. Dr. Walker calibrated the military guidance system while Dr. Hammond programmed the final nanobot parameters. The door burst open. Senior Counselor Thex entered with 4 Gamelin security officers. "Remove the patient. Now." Earth Defense Force troops moved to block the doorway, weapons powered but pointed downward. The room crackled with tension as 2 civilization security forces faced each other across the medical equipment. Ambassador Krell stepped between them, his diplomatic markings gleaming. He looked at his daughter, then at the human medical team that refused to give up on her. The weight of tradition pressed against the promise of innovation as he prepared to make his final choice. Dr. King maintained his focus on the medical readouts, knowing that whatever came next would reshape the boundaries of both human and Gamelin medicine. The modified nanobots waited in their delivery chamber, their crystalline shells refracting the harsh medical bay lights while Yuna's monitors continued their urgent rhythm. Ambassador Krell raised his hand, silencing both security forces. His voice carried the weight of ages as he spoke words not uttered in centuries. By the first light of Gamulus, I invoke the right of parental sovereignty. The Gamelin security officers immediately lowered their weapons. Senior Counselor Thex's scaled skin paled. "You cannot," Thex started. "I can and I do," Krell interrupted. "Until the next rising of our home star, my authority over my child's care supersedes all others." He turned to Dr. King. "Proceed." Thex's lips pursed. "The Council will remember this, Ambassador." "Then let them remember I chose life over tradition." Dr. King activated the facility's transport systems. "Operating Theater 7 now. Every second counts." The medical team moved with practiced efficiency. Chief Engineer Parker arrived as they were installing the quantum guidance system, his weathered hands immediately finding the weak points in the setup. "The power coupling's inefficient," Parker noted, pulling tools from his kit. "We need to reconfigure the entire output matrix." Dr. Hammond and Dr. Walker huddled over the nanobot programming console while Dr. Petrov worked at a synthesis station, combining iridescent gamelin crystals with earth minerals. The nanobot's crystalline shells took shape under her guidance, each one precision-crafted to interface with Yuna's neural tissue. A sharp spike on the monitoring equipment drew Dr. King's attention. "Yuna's pain centers are crystallizing. Standard anesthesia protocols won't work." Dr. Marcus Wright studied the neural readings. "We need to think bigger." He accessed the facility's equipment inventory. "Get me a Mark VII stasis generator, the type they use for deep space trauma cases." The procedure hit its first major obstacle when the initial test of the delivery system sent cascading power surges through the guidance controls. Sparks erupted from the quantum interface as critical components failed. Parker's hands flew across the damaged systems. "The frequency modulators are fried. Without them, we can't target the nanobots precisely enough." Admiral Robinson spoke into his comm unit. "Lunar Defense Station, priority override. I need replacement quantum modulators and full engineering support." Dr. Petrov's station pinged an alert. Under her microscope, Yuna's neural crystals developed hairline fractures, spreading like spider webs through the structures. "The crystalline matrix is destabilizing," she announced, adjusting scanning frequencies. "Wait, there's a pattern to the vibrations." Her fingers danced across the controls, isolating a specific resonance signature. Dr. Hammond looked up from his programming. "If we can match that frequency, we could stabilize the entire crystal network during treatment," Dr. Walker finished. The team split into focused groups. Parker and Dr. Petrov modified the guidance system, while Dr. Hammond and Dr. Walker reprogrammed the nanobots to work in concert with the resonance frequency. Ambassador Krell accessed his secure files, transmitting ancient medical texts to the team's databases. Dr. Zara added her own expertise, explaining the intricacies of gamelin neural architecture that had never been shared with human physicians. "The crystal formations follow natural energy paths," she explained, displaying three-dimensional models, "like rivers flowing through neural canyons." The stasis field hummed to life around Yuna's bed as Dr. Wright calibrated its protective envelope. The monitoring equipment showed dangerous fluctuations where the field intersected with the resonance frequencies needed for crystal stabilization. "The fields are interfering with each other," Dr. Wright reported. "If we don't find the right balance," a proximity alert sounded. On the main display, a gamelin diplomatic vessel decelerated into solar orbit. Dr. King checked Yuna's latest readings. The crystal formations now encroached on her brain stem, disrupting the neural signals controlling her heart rate and breathing. Parker looked up from his work on the guidance system. "Give me 10 more minutes to stabilize these power fluctuations. Then we're ready." Dr. Petrov adjusted the resonance generators. "The frequency match is holding at 97%. It's the best we can achieve with current technology." Dr. Hammond uploaded the final nanobot programming while Dr. Walker triplet-checked the delivery trajectories. The modified treatment protocols represented the bleeding edge of both human and gamelan medical science. The life support equipment chirped a warning. Yuna's oxygen saturation began to drop as crystal formations interfered with her respiratory control centers. The medical team worked faster, knowing their window of opportunity narrowed with each passing moment. Ambassador Krell watched the humans racing to save his daughter, their dedication transcending the boundaries between their species. Behind him, through the observation windows, he could see the gamelan diplomatic vessel drawing closer to Earth. The diplomatic vessels approach cast shifting shadows through the observation windows as Dr. King initiated the treatment sequence. Transfer patient to operating theater 7. Initiate stasis protocols on my mark. Medical staff transformed the observation deck into a makeshift control center, positioning Ambassador Krell where he could witness every moment of his daughter's treatment. Holographic displays filled the air with cascading data streams as Dr. Hammond took control of the quantum guidance systems. Stasis field activating, Dr. Wright announced, his hands steady on the controls. The Mark VII generator hummed to life, enveloping Yuna in a shimmering energy field that stabilized her erratic vital signs. Dr. Petrov's resonance generators pulsed in harmony with the crystal formations. Containment field stable, neural crystal resonance locked at optimal frequency. The first wave of nanobots deployed, their crystalline shells glinting as they entered Yuna's peripheral nervous system. Dr. Walker tracked their progress through high-resolution neural imaging. Initial dissolution proceeding according to parameters, outer crystal layers responding to treatment. A sharp spike in neural activity drew Dr. King's attention. New crystal formation detected in the brainstem, growth rate exceeding previous patterns. The monitoring equipment displayed an accelerating cascade of crystallization spreading through previously unaffected regions. The dissolution is triggering a feedback loop, Dr. Hammond reported, his fingers flying across the guidance controls. Crystal growth accelerating exponentially. Dr. King made a split-second decision. Redirect nanobots to brain stem protection protocols, priority on preserving vital functions. The quantum guidance system whined in protest as it adjusted to the new parameters. Warning indicators flashed across Parker's engineering station. Power draw exceeding safe limits. We're pushing the hospital generators beyond capacity. Admiral Robinson activated his tactical comm. Lunar Defense Station, this is Robinson, requesting emergency power redirect to Medical Facility 7. Parker's engineering team moved with military precision, installing heavy-duty power conduits through the facility's maintenance access ways. The distinct whine of military-grade capacitors filled the corridors as they integrated the defense station's power grid with the hospital's systems. Dr. King, Dr. Hammond called out, you need to see this. The neural imaging display showed unexpected patterns forming where the crystals dissolved. The formations aren't just breaking down, they're creating new neural pathways. Dr. Walker adjusted the nanobot programming in real time, modifying dissolution protocols, switching to neural pathway preservation mode. The treatment room's doors slid open as Senior Medical Administrator Keck strode in, flanked by gamelan medical officials. This unauthorized procedure ends now. Hospital Director Robinson stepped forward, initiating emergency quarantine protocols. This facility is now sealed under Section 30, one of the Interspecies Medical Code. This violation of gamelan medical sovereignty will not stand, Kex declared. All medical cooperation between our worlds will cease. Power fluctuations rippled through the facility as the defense station's energy feed integrated with the hospital grid. The stasis field wavered, and Yuna's neural readings spiked. Manual field compensation required, Dr. Wright announced, adjusting the stasis controls. Patient showing signs of pain response. We need to accelerate the timeline. Dr. King studied the latest neural scans. Look at this pattern. The reformed crystal structures pulsed in perfect synchronization with Yuna's natural brain activity. The nanobots aren't just stabilizing the formations, they're integrating them into her neural architecture. Ambassador Krell's comm unit chimed with an incoming transmission from the High Council. The message was brief but clear: continue allowing the human intervention, and his diplomatic credentials would be revoked immediately. Parker's voice cut through the tension. Power stabilization at 90%. We can maintain current levels for 17 minutes before system degradation becomes critical. The nanobots continued their work, guided by quantum precision and stabilized by resonance fields as they transformed chaotic crystal growths into organized neural structures. Each passing second brought new data about the intersection of human and gamma neural architecture. Dr. King checked the latest brain stem readings. The crystal formations had stopped their aggressive expansion, but the modified neural pathways now carried signals in patterns never before documented in either species. The monitoring equipment shrieked as power levels plummeted across the hospital's primary grid. Red warning indicators flashed across Parker's engineering station, despite the additional support from the Lunar Defense Station. "We're losing core power." Parker's hands flew across his console. Crystal dissolution is drawing more energy than projected. Backup systems engaging, but they won't sustain full operational capacity. Dr. King studied Yuna's neural readings. Continue the procedure. Switch all non-essential systems to emergency power. Dr. Hammond's voice carried urgency as he analyzed the latest scans. These deeper formations, they're different. The older crystals have a denser molecular structure. He adjusted the quantum controls, trying to compensate. Current nanobot programming isn't sufficient. Sparks erupted from an overhead junction box as another power surge rippled through the facility. The stasis field flickered, causing Yuna's vitals to spike erratically. "Field containment failing," Dr. Wright reported, his fingers dancing across the controls. Patient showing increased neural activity. The treatment room doors slid open as Sarah Robinson entered, pushing a cart laden with sleek, cylindrical devices. Prototype fusion cells from the Deep Space Program. They're untested for medical applications, but they'll give you the power you need. Parker examined the experimental units. These could work, but integration with the hospital grid. He paused, calculating. One surge at the wrong moment could fry every system in the building. Sarah connected diagnostic equipment to the nearest fusion cell. "We'll need to manually modulate the power flow. Each cell has to be synchronized perfectly." As they worked to integrate the new power source, Ambassador Krell accessed an ancient data crystal. These formations, they appear in our earliest medical records. He transmitted the files to Dr. King's station. "During our species development on Gammalus, similar crystalline structures emerged naturally in our ancestors." Dr. Petrov analyzed the historical data. These resonance patterns match prehistoric Gammalin neural architecture. She adjusted her equipment, aligning the frequencies with the ancient readings. The reformed crystals stabilized, their structure becoming more organized. A cascading failure ripped through the quantum guidance system. Sectors went dark one by one as critical components overloaded. "Manual intervention required." Dr. Walker moved to the guidance controls. "I can direct the nanobots through the primary neural pathways, but I'll be exposed to radiation from the fusion cells." "Do it," Dr. King ordered, "but maintain minimal safe distance." From outside the treatment room, Administrator Kex's voice came through the intercom. "Our archives contain similar cases. The crystals, they're not just a disease. They form a secondary neural network when properly structured." Dr. King processed this information as he studied the latest scans. "Adjust treatment protocols. Target only unstable formations. preserve and reshape the viable crystal structures. The power grid failed completely. Darkness engulfed the treatment room before emergency lighting activated. Parker and Sarah moved in perfect synchronization, physically disconnecting safety interlocks to route power directly from the fusion cells. Direct coupling established, Sarah announced, monitoring radiation levels. You have maybe 15 minutes before the cells destabilize. The quantum guidance display showed the nanobots adapting to their new programming, reshaping crystal formations rather than dissolving them. Where organic and crystalline structures merged, new neural pathways flickered to life. Enhanced neural activity detected, Dr. Hammond reported. The hybrid pathways are showing increased signal propagation speed. Yuna's monitors displayed new crystal growth spreading through untreated regions of her brain. Dr. King studied the emerging patterns, noting how they differed from the original formations. The integration is triggering additional crystallization, Dr. Petrov observed. But these new structures are following the stabilized pattern. They're self-organizing according to the ancient templates. Dr. Wright adjusted the stasis field to accommodate the expanding crystal network. Neural integration holding stable, but we need to address these new formations before they interfere with the treated areas. Sarah checked the fusion cell readings. Power levels dropping. Whatever you're going to do it fast. Containment Protocol Alpha, Dr. King announced, eyes fixed on the spreading crystallization patterns. Dr. Hammond established neural buffer zones. Dr. Walker maintained stability in the treated regions. Dr. Hammond's fingers danced across the quantum controls, redirecting swarms of nanobots to form protective barriers around critical brain structures. Buffer zones initializing, targeting medulla and cerebellum first. The overhead displays flickered as another power surge rippled through the system. Sarah Robinson sprinted from the room, returning moments later with 3 additional fusion cells on a reinforced cart. Direct feed from Lunar Defense. We'll need to modify the distribution network. Chief Engineer Parker nodded, already reconfiguring power routing protocols. Bypassing standard safety interlocks. Dr. King, you'll have full power in 3 minutes. Dr. Petrov's voice cut through the mechanical chorus of medical alerts. These new formations, they're mimicking the stable regions. She enhanced the neural imaging display, highlighting identical crystalline patterns repeating across previously untreated areas. It's like they're using our successful modifications as a template. Adjust treatment protocols, Dr. King ordered, studying the replication patterns. Support the natural crystal growth but maintain stabilization parameters. Dr. Walker, reprogram nanobots for guided formation instead of dissolution. The treatment room's door slid open as Dr. Marcus Robinson entered, tablet in hand. The crystal structures matched dormant genetic markers in the Gamelin genome. This isn't just a disease, it's an evolutionary mechanism. Administrator Keck stepped forward, accessing a secure data crystal. Similar cases appeared during our early development. We classified them as neural metamorphosis events. Ancient medical records filled the auxiliary screens, showing identical crystalline patterns in prehistoric Gamelin brain scans. Ambassador Krell activated his comm unit, initiating emergency override of Medical Directive 739. Requesting immediate suspension of treatment restrictions. His voice carried authority as he transmitted his credentials to the High Council. Alarms blared as energy readings spiked across monitoring stations. Dr. Walker leaned closer to his displays, shielding his eyes from the growing brightness of the crystal matrices. Energy signatures detected within the stabilized formations. They're forming some kind of secondary processing network. Cooling system failure imminent, Parker announced, his hands moving between 3 separate engineering stations. Rerouting auxiliary coolant lines. Sarah, we need those containment field modifications now. Sarah Robinson adjusted the fusion cell's field parameters, creating a heat sink effect that drew thermal energy away from critical systems. Containment fields modified. You have maybe 20 minutes before we lose thermal stability. A brilliant pulse of energy erupted from Yuna's neural array, sending cascading failures through the quantum guidance systems. Dr. Hammond grabbed manual controls, compensating for the electromagnetic interference. Pulse frequency increasing. We're losing precise nanobot control. Doctor Wright fought to maintain the stasis field's integrity as each pulse threatened to collapse the containment bubble. Field harmonics destabilizing. Implementing adaptive frequency modulation. The treatment room doors opened again, admitting Dr. Michael Torres. He moved immediately to the nearest monitoring station, analyzing the crystal formation patterns. These matrices mirror experimental biocrystalline computing arrays we've developed on Mars. The energy signatures suggest similar processing capabilities. Dr. King integrated Tor's insights into the treatment protocols, adjusting nanobot behavior to support the emerging neural architecture. Maintain current parameters. Focus on stability over speed. The modified fusion cells hummed at maximum output as Parker's team worked to balance power distribution across the failing hospital grid. Coolant lines snaked across the floor, jury-rigged connections, bleeding excess heat from overworked systems. Dr. Hammond's hands never left the guidance controls, making microscopic adjustments as each electromagnetic pulse threatened to overwhelm the delicate balance they'd achieved. Through the quantum imaging displays, they watched as organic and crystalline neural pathways merged into something entirely new. Integration reaching critical threshold, Dr. Walker reported, monitoring the expanding neural network. Crystal matrix processing power exceeding baseline organic capacity by factor of 7 and climbing. Steam hissed from overtaxed cooling units as Sarah Robinson rerouted another power conduit. The room's temperature climbed steadily despite their best efforts to maintain optimal conditions. Through it all, the crystal matrices continued their controlled growth, guided by the combined expertise of two worlds' medical science. On the main display, Yuna's neural map blazed with activity as organic and crystalline pathways formed new connections, creating hybrid structures that defied conventional medical understanding. The monitoring equipment struggled to keep pace with the increasing complexity of these emerging neural architectures. New energy signature detected, Dr. Torres announced, adjusting his instruments to capture the phenomenon. The crystal networks are generating coordinated pulse patterns. They're not just processing, they're actively reorganizing. The quantum guidance system sparked as another electromagnetic pulse ripped through the treatment room. Dr. Hammond compensated manually, his movements precise despite the growing interference. Nanobot control restored, continuing guided formation protocols. A brilliant azure glow emanated from beneath Yuna's skin as the crystal matrices pulsed in synchronized patterns. Dr. Tor's fingers flew across his control panel, implementing modified biocrystalline computing protocols from his Mars research. Neural synchronization approaching critical mass, he announced, adjusting parameters in real time. Crystal matrices are self-organizing faster than predicted. A catastrophic bang echoed through the facility as 3 cooling units failed simultaneously. Red warning indicators flooded every display as temperature readings spiked into dangerous territory. Primary cooling grid offline, Parker shouted, already moving to emergency controls. Secondary systems failing. We need to dump heat now. Sarah Robinson accessed building controls, initiating emergency ventilation protocol, sealing off lower levels. She turned to Parker. The eastern and western emergency stairwells if we redirect coolant flow. Do it, Parker nodded, understanding immediately. They worked in tandem, converting the stairwells into makeshift heat exchangers. Cool air rushed through the newly created system as facility alerts quieted to manageable levels. Dr. Wright's monitors registered a subtle change in neural patterns. Dr. King consciousness readings shifting. She's starting to respond. The stasis field rippled as new neural pathways activated. Dr. King studied the readings, noting the increasing complexity of interaction between organic and crystalline structures. Begin controlled stasis reduction. 10% intervals. Let's give her brain time to adjust. Ambassador Krell pressed closer to the observation window as the crystal matrices beneath his daughter's skin pulsed with increasing brightness. Each wave of bioluminescence corresponded to new neural activity patterns on Dr. Hammond's displays. Crystalline integration stable, Dr. Hammond reported. Nanobot swarms maintaining optimal formation patterns across all regions. The stasis field dimmed gradually under Dr. Wright's careful control. Yuna's fingers twitched her first voluntary movement in weeks. The room fell silent except for the hum of equipment as her eyes began to flutter. Neural activity normalizing, Dr. Petrov announced, monitoring the hybrid pathways. Crystal matrices achieving full synchronization. Yuna's eyes opened, revealing irises that now held traces of crystalline iridescence. Her lips moved, and ancient words filled the treatment room, a Gamelin healing prayer passed down through generations. Impossible, Ambassador Krell whispered. She never learned those words. Dr. Petrov enhanced her neural scans. The crystal matrices are accessing genetic memory patterns. They're integrating ancestral neural data stored in dormant sections of Gamelin DNA. Administrator Kex activated his comm unit, informing the High Council. Treatment restrictions officially lifted. He paused, watching Yuna interact with her father. Request immediate dispatch of research delegation. The fusion cells powered down as the crystal matrices achieved self-sustaining operation. Dr. Tor's instruments recorded processing speeds that exceeded standard neural capabilities by orders of magnitude. Where the treatment had preserved life, it had also opened doors to unprecedented cognitive enhancement. Sarah Robinson began disconnecting the emergency power systems, while Parker restored standard environmental controls. The makeshift cooling system had performed its job, keeping temperatures within acceptable parameters during the critical final phase. Through the observation window, Yuna sat up slowly, supported by her father. The crystal formations beneath her skin pulsed softly, now fully integrated with her natural neural architecture. She turned to Dr. King, her enhanced eyes focusing with new clarity. "Thank you," she said in perfect English, then repeated it in Gamelin, the translations flowing simultaneously from her enhanced neural pathways. Dr. King nodded, already compiling treatment data as his team began their preliminary analysis of the procedure's success. The King-Hammond protocol would need extensive documentation before it could be refined for wider application. Administrator Kex approached Dr. King. "The High Council requests complete data sharing. Your team's achievement marks a new chapter in medical cooperation between our peoples."